I never believed in the stories they told about skinwalkers. Not until that night. It was just another summer, another trip to my grandmother's land. But then, we heard it. A scream that split the night. When I looked out, I saw nothing. But I felt something. Something wrong. The next day, the footprints appeared, leading to the mountains. But no one could explain them. And that's when we realized we weren't alone. What was out there, waiting in the dark, and what did it want with us? I still can't shake the feeling it's watching, waiting. But what if it's still out there, just waiting for someone to look? Keep watching till the end to find out what happened, and what's still out there. But before we start, don't forget to hit subscribe or follow so you'll never miss a spine-tingling episode. If you're enjoying our content, please give us a like, drop a comment, and share this video to help us reach 100 likes. Every like brings us one step closer to the next terrifying episode. And if you want even more creepy content, follow us on our social media platforms for the latest updates. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. And now, let's dive into the darkness together. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, my family made our usual pilgrimage to our ancestral homeland, deep in the heart of northern Mexico. This was an annual tradition, where relatives from various parts of the country, including Texas and Kansas, would converge on my grandmother's land to participate in cultural ceremonies and practices. Her name was Elena, and her property stretched across the base of a foreboding mountain range that locals called the Dark Peaks. Everyone treated those mountains with deep respect, even fear. Elders told stories about the land's ability to drive people mad if they ventured too far up without the proper spiritual protection. Grandma Elena had 2 small houses on her land. The older house was sealed up tight, with metal bars over the windows that didn't open, and reinforced steel doors to keep out wild animals or any intruders. The newer house was more comfortable, with similar bars but windows that could be swung open to let in the cooling breeze. It was a luxury during the summer heat. On this particular visit, my mother, Celia, and father, Gregorio, set my 2 sisters, Lucia and Violeta, and me up in the older house, while my Aunt Rosa and Uncle Javier took their kids, Pilar and Manuel, to the new house. Other relatives like Chavo and Lirio were scattered across the land, helping with daily chores and preparations for the upcoming ceremonies. Even though we were familiar with the isolation and the darkness of the land, each year it felt as if we were entering a completely different world. There were no streetlights for miles, just a deep, inky blackness that swallowed everything when the sun went down. The only light came from the headlights of our truck or the flicker of a campfire if we were lucky. Without these, the darkness was so thick you could hardly see your hand in front of your face. The night air was thick and muggy in the older house. We had shut all the windows to keep out the heat and tried to sleep. After a long day of work, it didn't take long for us to drift off. But in the middle of the night, we were all jerked awake by the sound of a scream. It was Pilar, only 2 years older than me, and her scream cut through the night like a sharp blade. It came from the newer house. Half awake and disoriented, I scrambled to the window, where I could just make out my father's towering figure moving rapidly toward the house. My Aunt Rosa was frantically pointing at the fence line while Uncle Javier and some older cousins combed the land with flashlights. I could feel the tension in the air. Why were they so worked up? Why was this not just a nightmare? They didn't settle down until dawn. By morning, my sisters and I were exhausted, having barely managed to fall back asleep. I went to find Manuel to see what had happened. He told me that Pilar had been napping near an open window when something brushed her face. She had woken up to see an old, pale woman pressing her face between the bars. The woman's long gray hair hung around her face as she stared down at Pilar with a strange, wide smile. Pilar had screamed, and that's when everything had erupted in chaos. At first, I thought it was just another trick of the dark. The mind can play tricks in that kind of isolation. But Manuel insisted Pilar was adamant that she had seen a real person. As I walked around the property later with Chavo, he mentioned that they had found strange footprints near every window on the land. The prints led toward the mountains. And the odd thing was, whoever had left them had circled both houses, moving silently through the darkness on bare feet. The thought of someone walking around the land in the dead of night, without a sound, without stumbling, made my stomach turn. And it wasn't just that night. Over the next few days, we kept seeing signs. One evening, my Aunt Rosa swore she saw someone standing by the fence. She thought it was a neighbor, but when she called out, the figure disappeared without a sound. The unsettling feeling in the air only grew after that. One night, while my sister Violetta and I gathered kindling, we heard someone moving through the brush beyond the fence. It stopped when we froze, but we couldn't see anyone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My sister and I quickly made our way back inside, leaving the firewood behind. That night, my grandmother Elena and mother quietly talked in the other room. Elena spoke of a pale woman who had been seen on the land before many years ago. She would stand near the windows, muttering to herself, or sometimes just watching from the edges of the property. Elena said the mountains held spirits that thrived on fear and isolation. If this woman had come down from the mountains, it meant something far more dangerous was approaching. Later that week, while staying in the older house with the windows sealed, we tried to rest. My sister Violetta, always the brave one, stayed up reading by lantern light. At midnight, she heard something scraping on the outside wall, long, slow scratches like fingernails on metal. She froze and snuffed out the lantern, pressing her face to the window, trying to see in the moonlight. She thought she saw a hunched figure limping away, its stringy hair glinting silver in the dim light. Fear gripped her heart. That night, my cousin Chavo stayed awake, watching over the house with a flashlight and rifle. My uncle Javier burned protective herbs around the perimeter, and Elena barely slept, alternating between guiding ceremonies and worrying about the mysterious intruder. By the last night, things took a more sinister turn. Sia was in the new house cooking when she saw a pale hand grip the bars of a window. She screamed, dropped the pot she was holding, and ran to get help. By the time we all rushed out, the figure was gone, but muddy handprints were left on the window. We followed the footprints through the scrub and into the foothills, only to find small patches of disturbed earth, as if someone had dragged their feet. But we didn't dare go further without a ceremony. Elena insisted we leave immediately. She told us, "Some places have a hunger for fear, and if you wander in unprepared, you might find what's been feeding on it." We left a day earlier than planned, none of us wanting to stay any longer. On the drive back, as we left the isolation of the dirt roads behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us, something from the mountains that had been watching from the shadows. Years later, I asked my mother why no one had questioned Pilar's story. She reminded me that these sightings weren't new. Elders believed that a spirit from the mountains took on the shape of the old woman to peer into windows and creep across fences. And after we found the footprints, it was clear that something had been lurking on that land, something that fed on our fear. Even today, I can't bring myself to visit Mexico often, and when I do, I always stay in the old house with the windows sealed tight. My relatives still speak of the pale figure who prowls the land, always around large gatherings when people are too distracted to notice what's creeping around in the dark. Sometimes, I catch myself wondering if there's something in those mountains, something that can wear a human face for a night, just to remind us that it's still out there. The thought alone makes me reluctant to glance out the window after dark, half expecting to see that chilling smile just beyond the bars. A few months ago, I reconnected with an old friend of mine, someone I had worked with years ago while running supply caravans across the barren landscapes of the western Navajo Nation. We hadn't spoken in a while, so when we finally caught up, he mentioned something that piqued my interest, a strange experience involving one of the women who had accompanied the caravan. This incident had happened a couple of years ago, and after hearing about it, I felt compelled to reach out to her. Let's call her Emily. After some effort, I was able to get her contact information, and we spoke about her experience. I wanted to share her story, but out of respect for her culture and the taboos surrounding such events, I've altered some of the names and details. Here's her story, with the necessary changes made to ensure her privacy. We were in the Painted Cliffs region at the time, near a coal mining site leased by Peabody. This area, located in the high desert, is filled with stark, flat plains, interrupted by dry creek beds known as arroyos. The region is seldom blessed with rain, but when storms do hit, the arroyos flood, creating an eerie, surreal atmosphere. It was on a day like this that Emily's ordeal began. It started when Emily was assigned to track down a lamb that had escaped from its pen. The flock had wandered off to the edge of the enclosure, and when she chased after it, she found herself disoriented and lost. She tried to retrace her steps, but soon the landscape seemed to twist and shift in a way that made it impossible to find her way back. She wandered down one of the shallow arroyos, hoping it might lead her to a road or path. But as she walked, a thick cloud of dust kicked up, which triggered her asthma. Within moments, she was struggling to breathe, and panic began to set in. Her chest tightened, her vision blurred, and she collapsed in the dry dirt, losing consciousness. When she came to, the moon was already high in the sky, and the desert was completely dark. Disoriented and frightened, Emily struggled to her feet. She could hear the distant sounds of the night, crickets, wind, but something else. Something unnatural. Then, she heard a twig snap behind her. She turned, heart racing, convinced someone was nearby. In the dim light of the moon, she saw a figure, dark and motionless, lurking behind a distant tree. At first, she thought it was one of her friends, maybe even Charlie, a fellow member of the caravan. She called out into the silence, her voice shaky. "Hello? Is someone there? I'm lost." For a long moment, the only response was the cold desert silence. But then, the figure stepped out from behind the tree. It looked like Charlie, or at least, it seemed to be him. He waved and motioned for her to follow. Relieved, though still disoriented, Emily decided to trust the figure and began walking toward him. They walked together down the arroyo, the silence between them growing more oppressive. Emily felt her unease intensifying with each step. As they moved deeper into the shadows, Emily noticed something odd. Another figure materialized from the darkness ahead. It was tall and strange, a silhouette that didn't look quite human. The air around her seemed to thicken, her head aching with each passing moment. And then, as if summoned from the void, more figures appeared, standing in a half-circle around her. Emily's heart nearly stopped as she realized they were not human at all. They were enormous, twisted creatures, like giant coyotes, their glowing eyes staring back at her in the dim moonlight. She froze, her body shaking. She tried to move, but her legs wouldn't respond. Panic set in as she realized she was surrounded. The creatures didn't move, but their eyes never left her. And then, a sudden intense pain shot through her skull like a migraine of unimaginable force. She staggered backward, the world spinning around her. Without thinking, Emily turned and ran, the sound of her footsteps loud in the quiet desert. She ran for what felt like miles, the air burning in her lungs. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, she heard it, a twig snapping again. She dared to look behind her, and to her horror, one of the coyote-like creatures was standing on the ridge above her. Its eyes glowed in the moonlight, and then, the creature did something impossible. It stood up, rising on its hind legs with an unnatural jerk. A blood-curdling scream ripped through the air, louder than any coyote howl, distorted as though amplified by a loudspeaker. Emily's mind screamed in terror, but she didn't stop. She ran harder, faster, her legs burning, her heart racing in her chest. Eventually, she stumbled onto a service road. A truck appeared in the distance, and she waved frantically until it slowed. It was a worker from the Peabody mine, and after convincing him to give her a ride, she climbed into the cab of the truck, trembling. As the truck moved away, Emily glanced in the rearview mirror. She saw them, the glowing eyes, watching her from the edge of the desert, flickering in the truck's red brake lights. She couldn't tell if they were still following her, but she knew she didn't want to find out. When they reached the small settlement, Emily went straight to her friend Johnny's house, nearly collapsing as she explained the terrifying encounter. Johnny's parents, who spoke only their native language, could see the terror in her eyes. They immediately contacted a local medicine man, hoping to protect her from whatever forces had followed her back. That night, Emily slept fitfully, and in the morning, the house was blessed. Though nothing further happened, she felt as if the experience had changed her in some unexplainable way. She cut her trip short and left the desert behind, never returning. A few years ago, my Uncle Jordan shared a chilling story with me that always gave me the creeps. He would tell it to me during our camping trips, and it still haunts me. My uncle, originally from Utah, was sent on a mission at the age of 19 to a reservation in Arizona. Upon arriving, he was paired with a companion named Tyler. From the start, the locals on the reservation were hostile toward them, refusing to let them stay on the reservation grounds. After much tension, the two were allowed to stay in a trailer on the outskirts of the reservation near a vast forested area. The first night, as they were trying to sleep, something terrifying happened. The trailer started shaking violently, rocking from side to side. Startled and unsure of what was happening, Jordan and Tyler ducked under the table for cover. They could distinctly hear something, or someone, pushing the trailer from both sides, almost as if a group of people were trying to shake it. After several minutes, the shaking stopped. The next day, as they were talking to some of the locals, Tyler casually mentioned the trailer shaking the previous night. The moment he said this, the conversation went silent. The family they were speaking to became visibly uneasy and insisted that they leave. The two missionaries were confused but didn't think much of it at the time. However, that night, the shaking started again. This time they climbed under the table, too terrified to even check what was causing it. After several nights of the same eerie occurrences, they decided to ask around more. One day, they stopped by a local store, and while talking about their frustrations with the situation, the store clerk overheard. He immediately warned them not to speak of it, as it was forbidden. When Jordan and Tyler pressed him for details, the clerk revealed that they were being haunted by skinwalkers, dark, evil spirits, once believed to be witches. He explained that speaking about them would invite these creatures to come for their souls. At first, Jordan and Tyler thought it was just another scare tactic, but they couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. That night, when the trailer shook once more, Jordan decided to confront whatever was out there. He threw open the door, yelling at the creatures, "Come on, let's see what you've got!" To his horror, he saw 3 figures in the distance, 2 wolves and 1 bear, but something was terribly off. They had human-like features and moved with unnatural precision. As Jordan watched in disbelief, the creatures stood up on 2 legs, walking toward the trees, laughing with a cackling, human-like sound that chilled him to the core. Terrified, Jordan and Tyler immediately called their mission president the next morning, begging to be moved. They were relocated the very same day. For a year, things went back to normal. Then, one day, Jordan's companion, Tyler, was reassigned to a different city, and a new companion, Jimmy, arrived. The 3 had to drive about an hour to pick Jimmy up from the airport. The road they took passed through the reservation boundaries, and it was around 8 p.m. when they picked up Jimmy. As they prepared to head back, the mission president warned them sternly that they would be driving through a dangerous area at night and couldn't make any stops. Jimmy, being insistent that he was fine, dismissed the warning, but the mission president was serious. "If you need to go to the bathroom, do it now." Despite Jimmy's reluctance, he eventually went to use the restroom. As soon as he finished, the mission president abruptly pulled him into the car and sped off, without a word. As the car picked up speed, Jordan looked out the window and froze. On the right side of the car, running in sync with them, was a gigantic wolf-like creature, running on 2 legs. Jordan was stunned. It was impossible for this thing to be keeping up at over 60 miles per hour. For 10 minutes, the creature stayed right alongside the car, its glowing eyes fixed on them, until it finally veered off into the trees, disappearing into the darkness. Once they arrived at their destination, Jimmy was in shock and asked, "What was that?" The mission president simply replied, "Next time I tell you to take care of your business, you take care of it." If you've made it to the end of this video, let me know in the comments which story creeped you out the most. And if you could survive only one of these stories, which one would it be? Also, drop "I made it" and mention our channel in the comments below. I want to know who my loyal followers are so I can give you a shout out in our next videos. And lastly, if you've experienced a terrifying encounter or have a horror story to share, send it to us on Reddit. And if you want to support the channel and help us create even more spine-chilling content, check out our Patreon or Ko-Fi. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to like and share the video, and now, stay tuned for our next horror episode.